This is Stephanie Murphy from Let's Talk Bitcoin, and we are at the Let's Talk Bitcoin lunch meetup at the Firewheel Cafe in the Lost Pines Hotel. I'm here with Kristov Atlas. Hi, Kristov.
Hi, good to be here.
Kristov is a friend of mine, and he came to the meetup, and I'm really glad to see him, but he also has a really important and cool project that he's working on that I really want to share with the audience, because this is something that we talk about a lot in the Bitcoin world. Where's the future of Bitcoin going? Are we going to a future where everything is tracked and we're going to be coin validated and scrutinized, and all of our finances are going to be out there in the open for stalker ex-husbands and creepy governments to look at? Or are we going to retain control over our financial privacy? And are we going to actually have the power to do what I think Bitcoin intended, which is, empower people over their own finances? So Kristov has written a book called The Anonymous Bitcoin Book, right?
That's right, yeah.
So Kristov, tell me a little bit about the book and why you decided to write it.
What inspired me to write the book was I was seeing a lot of folklore about Bitcoin and its anonymity and the level of privacy that you would get with Bitcoin. If you read news articles or look at forum posts or whatever, you'll see a lot of people just saying, Bitcoin, it's an anonymous currency and stuff like that. And especially when it comes to things like the Silk Road, if people want to mischaracterize Bitcoin, one of the first things that they'll trot out is that it's this anonymous currency being used by criminals to buy drugs and stuff like that. And really, the design of Bitcoin is pretty open. And I think something that people would find surprising is that in many ways, Bitcoin has less financial privacy than the legacy banking system that we're coming out of. If you get a paycheck in the mail from your boss, you don't expect that he's going to be tracking what you're spending your money on, what kind of groceries you're buying, what are you picking up from CVS. But something like that could potentially happen with Bitcoin, depending on how people follow best practices for privacy and so forth. And since it's a nascent technology, people have always had a difficulty with privacy and technology, and they tend to do whatever comes easiest. And if you don't make privacy easy, then they won't use things in the most private way. And Bitcoin doesn't make it that easy to use it in a private way. There's a spectrum of privacy that you can have with Bitcoin, and on the extreme end, you can have a very high level of anonymity. But right now, the default and the way that people are using Bitcoin is that they're not getting a whole lot of financial privacy out of that. And so I wanted to write a book for people where if they decide that I wanted to first educate them about what the state of privacy is right now, what it's going to look like, what your privacy is going to look like if you continue to use Bitcoin in the way that most people are using it. And then I wanted to give them a very straightforward, leaving nothing up to the imagination approach to how to use Bitcoin in a very anonymous kind of fashion and get a lot of financial privacy out of the currency.
And you have a background in computer security, right?
Yeah, that's right. I've been a computer security researcher and consultant for a number of years. And I recently just quit my job to focus full-time on writing about Bitcoin and privacy.
Right. So can you give me an example of perhaps how a typical Bitcoin user might use Bitcoin and it could be totally traceable and they might not even know about it?
Sure. So I gave a talk at the conference the other day, and I gave this sort of hypothetical scenario where there's two people and one of them sends a tip to the other in Bitcoin. And I was describing how this would look on the blockchain. The blockchain is this public ledger of all of the Bitcoin transactions. We don't have anything like that for cash. There's no ledger of cash transactions, which is part of the reason why cash can be so anonymous. And so the way that these kind of transactions show up on the blockchain is that often we learn a lot about people's identity. Addresses get associated with one another, and particularly if there's something like where they don't have enough Bitcoin in one of their Bitcoin addresses to send the total that they want to send to the other person, they have to pool together from multiple accounts. And a lot of times their Bitcoin client will just kind of do this automatically for them.
So, for instance, if you have a blog or a Twitter account or something and you post an address publicly, people could say, okay, well, we know Kristov owns this address, and on the blockchain, there are outputs from that address that are going to other change addresses, so those also must belong to him too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Change addresses or addresses being pooled together in order to get up to a total that you want to send. And so basically what's happening on the blockchain is that there is this incredible graph of people's Bitcoin addresses, and they don't see this happening. It's something that's going on, behind the scenes, and it's an incredible data mining tool for whoever wants to mine it, whether it's corporations or governments or just creepy, snoopy people that want to find out what you're doing. And you're not able to see the full effect of your finances. If you deal with something like cash or writing checks or whatever, you know exactly who it's going to, who's going to be able to see the check that you're handing, or who's going to be who's standing around to watch your cash transaction. But the weird thing about Bitcoin is it's like cash, but the entire world is standing around watching the cash transaction. So I think it's really important. I consider it to be sort of a financial self-defense technique to learn how to use the currency privately and retain some privacy when you're doing your finances.
Now, what about the argument that everyone will trot out, if you have nothing to hide, what are you worried about?
That's a very old and common argument. There is this guy named Daniel J. Solove who wrote a paper a while ago called "I've Got Nothing to Hide and Other Misunderstandings of Privacy." Great paper, and basically what he's saying there is, even if you don't have something to hide, people in all tax jurisdictions and all legal jurisdictions still have some kind of legal risk that they're going to be blamed for something that they didn't actually do. We have real problems in court systems all over the world and with law enforcement and so forth, justice systems. And even if that doesn't happen to you, it happens to people all the time. So when you say, well, I don't have anything to hide, and therefore I'm not concerned about surveillance or censorship or whatever, you're throwing a bunch of other people under the bus. Fundamentally, it's an act of antipathy towards your fellow human being to throw that out as the standard, that if people are not doing anything bad, they shouldn't be worried about these type of things. And it has real world consequences for lots of people, very terrible consequences. So I think that financial privacy is something that we should invest in as a society. I think it's really important, whether you want to have a free anarchic society or if you want to have a healthy democratic society. In both cases, financial privacy is a very, very important thing.
You said something in your talk the other day that there was a law professor who threw out a statistic saying that every adult over the age of 18 could be, if they wanted to, indicted for some kind of federal crime in the U.S.
Yeah. Here's another statistic. In 2013, there were like 40,000 new federal laws that were passed on the books. And we actually don't know how many federal laws there are. There have been a number of organizations, legal organizations, that try to count it because it's kind of important to know what the laws are. And they weren't able to. They tried for a long time. They gave up. So, if you don't know how many laws are out there, then you can't stop yourself from breaking them. And what this law professor is basically saying is there's so many laws on the books, some of them are mutually contradictory, that people are breaking laws all the time that they're completely unaware of. And yet the standard that we have in our society is ignorance of the law is no excuse. Meanwhile, there is no one that knows all of the laws, right? So that's kind of a dangerous combination of principles to go by. It means that really anyone could get nabbed if they have the misfortune of, getting on the wrong side of someone.
Or what's to stop, something that is not currently illegal from becoming illegal in the future and the enforcement being applied retroactively when there's this nice historical record in the blockchain, right?
Yeah, that happens all the time. I mean, it happened to Mt. Gox, for instance. Their financial troubles, I mean, they had incompetence at their leadership levels, but their financial trouble started when they had $5 million seized by the U.S. government for filling out some paperwork in the incorrect way and doing it in a way that was pretty much fine at the time that they filled out the paperwork, but then there was some rule that was changed after the fact, or some clarification that was given about these very nebulous rules after the fact, and they weren't able to receive the news of this change, go back and look at their paperwork and make the change, and they lost $5 million as a result, which really got the ball rolling on the collapse of Mt. Gox. So, and I think it's something that's important to all Bitcoin users, because in a lot of places in the world, governments are not going to look upon Bitcoin very favorably. In some places, there are going to be bans or restrictions. There are going to be criminal charges that are made related to Bitcoin. And so you don't want to be one of the people that has the misfortune of putting your finances out there on the open, on the blockchain, and then finding out that later on some legislator decided that what you happened to do, which was recorded on the blockchain a few years ago, was in fact illegal, and now you could be prosecuted for it. So this is why I think it's sort of a financial self-defense, not only having privacy from people that you're doing business with and just kind of snoopy, creepy people or corporations, but also keeping keeping yourself safe from the legal aspect of things as well.
Right, and it's not just yourself, right? Because it is possible to associate, to incriminate other people with your Bitcoin activity on the blockchain. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. After the talk, I had a developer that came up to me. He's working on some accounting software for Bitcoin for tax purposes and whatnot. And he was really concerned because he listened to the talk and he's been following this privacy stuff for a while, and he doesn't want to create a tool that where someone can come for his records and use that information to go after the customers of his customers. That obviously makes his product less attractive to the customers, and from a moral standpoint, he doesn't want to be partly responsible for someone being incriminated for something that they don't deserve to be incriminated for. So it's a real concern. If you care about your fellow human being, you don't want to be participating in a system where they come under some kind of misfortune. And so when you use Bitcoin privately, you're helping out the people that you do business with as well.
So, okay, people have heard this and they're thinking, well, how do I use Bitcoin privately? And obviously there's a whole book that you've written about this, but give us some quick tips about how people can get greater privacy with their Bitcoin use.
Well, it depends on who you think might be trying to look into your Bitcoin activity. So I like to use this term for people that are looking at the blockchain. I call them investigators because it's a morally agnostic term. It could be someone that is a thief that's looking for targets, or it could be someone that's trying to recover Bitcoins for someone that was stolen from. So we don't really know who's going to be looking at this stuff, but depending on who that person is that's investigating you, you'd have different techniques. What I sort of recommend for people is that you take the worst case scenario investigator into consideration, and if you have that covered, then everyone else that you could possibly look into your finances will also be covered in that situation. And the worst case investigator would be something like someone working for the mob who's trying to track down targets for theft. Something like that. They have millions of dollars of resources. They're able to hack into internet service providers and get logs from customers' internet traffic and stuff like that. So I think there's probably two important categories of tools. One is the ability to kind of cover your tracks on side channels of information about your Bitcoin transaction. So like, for instance, if someone is logging all of the internet traffic out there on the internet, something like the NSA's PRISM program or something along those lines, you need to have some tool to kind of hide the geographic origins of your internet traffic. So something like Tor or I2P and so forth.
Does a VPN work for that or no?
A VPN is good, but all it does is basically it forces the investigator to do some extra work in order to get access to the logs. So it just means that they would have to hack into your VPN or otherwise obtain logs from that VPN in order to get access to your data, as opposed to just being able to get it directly from your ISP or whatever. So it adds one step. I would much rather see people use something like Tor, where there is no Tor person to go to get access to logs. It's distributed all over the world. So it's a decentralized solution to privacy.
However, I have heard that if you use Tor but then you log onto Facebook with Tor, it might be pretty easy to associate, to track your identity on Tor. Is that right?
Sure. So you still have to do, Tor is a very kind of primitive tool. All it does is it hides the geographic origins of your internet traffic, but there's still lots of ways to correlate internet activity with your person. So this is something I talk about in the book, but you kind of have to manage your identities on the internet. If you have, for instance, a local localbitcoins.com account that you always log into through Tor, well, if you're using a whole bunch of different Bitcoin addresses with that account, and someone is able to get access to the localbitcoins.com logs, now they're able to identify a connection between that local Bitcoin's identity and all of the addresses that are associated with that identity. So there's this kind of identity management that you have to do in addition to using these tools. I'd like to see the tools get better so that they can do this kind of identity management for people, or make it very obvious exactly how that's working out, but we're not quite there yet. I think the best thing that we have is something like a Tails Linux, where at least it's configuring Tor for you. Because if you just try to install a Tor on your your Windows machine or your Mac machine or whatever, it's kind of complicated. The computers these days work in very complicated ways. So even if you're doing all of your web browsing through Tor, there's all these like weird messages that are being sent out, like DNS queries and so forth. So if you're using an all-in-one package like Tails Linux, then it kind of does all that stuff for you, but you still have to do your own identity management.
What about mixing?
Mixing is very important. It's a way of dealing with the openness of the blockchain. Mixing is, I kind of think of it like shuffling cards, right? So, and you want to make sure that you get a mixer that is doing a good job of shuffling the cards. So if you've ever played cards with some friends, right, you have some friends that are really good at shuffling. They're like bridging the cards and they look like Vegas dealers. And then you have some friends that don't know what the heck they're doing, and they just they kind of cut the deck once and they take a card and they stick it in the middle, they deal it out, and you're like, dude, I got the same hand except for this one card the last round. You're terrible at this. So when it comes to your financial privacy, you definitely want to have the friend that's, the Vegas dealer and not the cut in the deck kind of person. Not only do you have to use Bitcoin mixers, but you need to know which ones to use and how to use them. That's something that I talk about in depth in the book, and something that I'm definitely planning on covering a lot more in the future, writing reviews of mixers and talking about which kind of mixing technologies are superior.
This is Chris Joseph bringing you news on Next, the first true second-generation cryptocurrency for March 22nd, 2014. Next has not been very friendly to traditional miners because it does not use the same proof-of-work system that many other altcoins do. But this week, 2 new mining pools have appeared that address this. Hashrate.org and Pool.org, that's pool with 2 zeros instead of O's, have both created pools that automatically mine the most profitable altcoins and then do pool payouts in Next. Both systems are in beta, but both are working rather well. In other news, discussions on the Next Asset Exchange have gotten a little more philosophical as the community debates fees and wonders if decentralized asset trading may make market abuse by bots and high-frequency traders a thing of the past. For more general information on Next, head to nextcrypto.org or mynxt.org. And stay tuned for more news on Next on the next Let's Talk Bitcoin broadcast.